When I got on the ground, finally in Entebbe, I quickly realized how little they understood the humanitarian game. I arrived in a headquarters in the Entebbe airport. There was just a hive of activity. Staff officers working 18 hours a day. We had several hundred of them there. Signalers pushing wire and putting up antennas. Wonderful. Nobody had any information about what was going on the ground inside the camps. No information.
We set up daily briefings, or more likely information exchanges with the NGOs, who are mostly all headquartered in the Nairobi area. And the first couple of days went along swimmingly until they figured out that we didn't know what was going on. I saw that there was no great reluctance to share information. It was just that it wasn't a sharing thing. We weren't giving them anything.
We did everything. We stumbled around like naive fools and looked that way, I'm sure, in the eyes of the Rwandans.
I guess at one particular time we had 4 foreign armies, 10 militia groups from 5 different countries, the ex-army of Zaire, okay, all involved in this thing, and we expected to go in and say, okay guys, you know, sort of stand aside while we take care of these poor refugees.
It was a disaster. We looked idiotic. It looked ad hoc, and it was ad hoc. We didn't have the strategic airlift to even move our own command and control personnel to that region and sustain them. We were dependent on everybody else in the coalition. Basically, it's almost the old free rider concept in microcosm, where we're going to provide these people, and then everybody just give us your resources, we'll command them for you in this very dangerous part of the world.
I think that in one fell swoop, Canada lost most of the credibility that General Dallaire had gained. I picture this as General Barry being handed a bag of snakes, being sent in as a grand innocent to an area that was just mined, just peopled with dungeons and dragons and pitfalls. He's not a slow man. He was very quick to understand the limitations on the mandate, the difficulties of doing what he was supposed to do.
General Barry, when he was reporting after the Zaire mission, stated in so many words that the only national strategy that he had to follow, the only national strategy and policy that he had to follow in this situation were those that he could infer from the United Nations resolution to deploy a force into the area. Other than that, he was on his own. And that is a problem that results when there is no one at home for General Barry to report to, except various departments or ad hoc committees.
But according to the aid agencies, the Canadian government had been informed as to exactly what was happening.
We had regular conference calls that involved the major agencies such as MSF, Doctors Without Borders, CARE, Red Cross as well, with the major departments of the Canadian government that were involved, with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with DND, and I believe fairly often too the PMO, or at least the Privy Council office, would be represented in those discussions.
In Zaire, neither rebel leader Kabila nor government leader Mobutu wanted the United Nations in the area. Kabila's rebel forces kept the multinational coalition force at bay by entering the camps and dispersing the refugees.
Kabila, the leader of the rebel group, wanting to avoid forces coming into the airports, which he would then lose control of, went into the refugee camps, and the end result is the refugee camps broke up.
This isn't just some ragtag group coming through. This is an extremely disciplined army that was defeating everything in its path. So that's why people started to empty out of the camps.
Mobutu is trying desperately to hang on to power and doesn't want the UN coming into the area, and has declared his willingness for his soldiers to die to the last man, as long as he's safe. You know, just an impossible mission.
We had all these refugees that had been forced out of the refugee camps. UNHCR and other UN agencies, they had got out.
Now all the aid workers have pretty much cleared out. There are a few still left on the ground. But the really concerning thing is that we saw hundreds and hundreds of refugees coming up the street as we were pulling out. And, you know, it's very upsetting because as an aid worker, you don't want to leave a situation like that. But from a security point of view, you have no option.
They hit the roads as many of them could. And then the Rwandan government, to preempt a multinational force actually coming in, announced that these people could come back to Rwanda and that there wouldn't be reprisal killings. That's why they went back.
I guess we saw that there are probably 600 or 700,000 people that are out there in very poor condition. There's warring factions that are fighting each other. These people are probably in the way getting killed.
When the picture came clearer and we began to work out the numbers and realized that close to 600,000 had come home to Rwanda, that so many thousand had died, that there was so many thousand in other areas, and that by and large the others had split up into smaller groups and exfiltrated or gone somewhere else where we couldn't reach them.
Now, there was a matter of 250,000 people who were unaccounted for. Now, perhaps they never existed in the camps. Perhaps there were errors in counting. It's certainly possible. But we then got into an interesting situation where there were some people in some countries who wanted the force nonetheless to go in to try to find these people or do what could be done to help them.
We then went through a point of where are the refugees? Okay. We had been through that before, okay, but there was some disbelief at the fact that all of a sudden all the refugees were pouring over the border, okay, back into Rwanda. Certainly from the NGO's point of view, they didn't think they were all there, and from what I've read after that, I think we were probably missing 500 or 600,000 out of, I don't know, 1 million and a bunch. But I guess there were enough coming over the border to declare victory, because that seems to be what happened.
The exodus of the 500,000 or 600,000 into Rwanda was certainly the turning point. And at that point, General Barry and his staff were still in place near Goma. And certainly we had been briefing all relevant departments of the government in Ottawa that that camp was now empty and that the bulk of the rest of the refugees had gone to the west. Our people in the field did brief General Barry and his people to that effect.
I had told him that, just to make it very simple, if you go this way, you won't find any refugees. If you go that way, you may find refugees. Well, what he did was he went this way.
General Barry went up that road and came back and announced to the world that the refugees were saved.
He then held a press conference and declared that there were no large concentrations of refugees, that they had largely dispersed into the jungle. And I remember one particular comment that he had made, that he was confident that the refugees could live off the herbs and fruits and whatever else that they could find in the jungle. And frankly, I was flabbergasted by his comment. I just couldn't believe that he could make such statements.